Hello again, and welcome back to the Fear and Beer podcast, where we talk all things horror, horror nights, and just a dash of beer. I'm Nick.
And I'm Shamus.
All right, guys, this is episode 6, and today we are going to be talking 90s. Now, this isn't going to be anything that ever will or could. We think it should, but it won't happen. This is just Nick and Shamus spitballing some 90s ideas. We're going to fill up an entire speculation map of just 90s properties or...
It's a 90s wish list, more or less. I would consider it more of a wish list than anything else.
Yeah, so this has nothing to do with anything that's going to be happening, but we did hear a couple weeks ago, we mentioned that there was a potential 90s theme overlaying the whole event this year. So whether that just coincides with merch or whatever like that, it makes sense because the event was 91. So, they will go from the 80s to the 90s. I get it. So we just kind of want to dive, headfirst into a 90s style wish list.
Yeah, blame Universal. They're the ones selling all the 90s gear.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got a boonie hat thing on.
I'm rocking the bucket hat with the old school neon pink logo. I got my Goosebumps shirt on. I'm ready for 90s.
I mean, honestly, the real reason is probably because it's their 30th year of being open as a theme park, but let's have some fun with it. So before we get into talking some more fear, let's talk about our beer. Obviously, that's the name. So what we have tonight is called Undead Party Crasher. Some more zombie stuff. It's by Clown Shoes. Now, Clown Shoes is a relatively bigger craft brewery nowadays. I mean, they started out pretty small, like all of them, but they've kind of grown, and they can kind of get it anywhere, as far as I can tell. I don't know if they distribute nationally, but they distribute all the way down to Florida. They are based out of Ipswich, Massachusetts, so right up where Nick and I are actually originally from. So it's a little bit of a shout out to our hometown, kind of. We didn't live as close to the ocean as they brewed this beer, but still from Mass, so, one from Mass, everyone's from Mass. So I'm going to crack this bottle. I'll talk a little bit about the beer, and we're going to enjoy it. Now, this is an American Imperial Stout. So essentially what that is the stout. It's an American-style stout. I'm not 100% sure what the difference is between an American-style stout or versus, a European stout or something like that. But it is a stout. It is an imperial, so it is going to be a little bit boozier than a normal stout. It's not your typical Guinness, I can tell you that much.
Yeah, this is mud water.
Funny you say that, because I've actually had a stout before, and it's called Mississippi Mud or something like that, and it comes in a old-timey XXX jug.
Yeah, this looks like really flat, Coke or root beer.
It looks like motor oil.
Yeah.
If you're a beer guy or a beer girl and you like stouts, you'll know what I'm talking about.
No, it's not as strong or potent or anything it's not exactly what I imagined.
Definitely smells like an imperial.
Yeah, I got a little bit of that coffee
taste. It's got
taste.
that boozy smell. Yeah, it's definitely got some coffee hints to it. What the bottle says is basically, in a world full of uncertainty, hardship, and people trying to hold us back, do we need the undead and trademark attorneys too? Clown Shoes says, no, die monsters, die. Forces of darkness brought about a change in the name of this beer, which was released to celebrate our 2nd anniversary, but it still sports signature dark malts, holy water, and malt smoked locally with hickory and ash. So it's definitely gonna have a woody taste too, obviously, from what the bottle says.
Yeah, so we picked this one out. Obviously, it's got that undead zombie style feel, but the Clown Shoe is the actual kind of hint or keyword that we were kind of hinting towards, one of the IPs that we're going to be talking about for our 90s wish list, but you'll catch on to that once we get going into this thing.
Oh yeah, that's good. So a little plug, I use Untapped to track all my beers, and it has, with 46,000 check-ins, a 3.98 rating. So it's pretty good for an Untapped rating. Not going to lie, I like it.
Yeah, I'm a fan of this. I like these dark, stouty style beers.
I guess it was previously named Vampire Slayer, but renamed due to legal wrangling. So that makes sense why they're talking about, lawyers and stuff on the bottle. So yeah, if you're out and about and you are at your local bottle shop or liquor store and you see Clown Shoes on the shelf, don't hesitate to pick it up. It's good stuff. And with that, why don't we start talking about some 90s stuff?
Let's do that. All right. let's break this down into a couple different things. We're going to talk houses, we're going to talk scare zones, and then we are going to talk kind of like a little miscellaneous, just little stuff that I want to see somehow in this event incorporated, whether it be food, drink, merch, and shows. So let's start with those heavy hitters. We'll start with our houses. Now, we broke these down. We kind of went through a handful of different properties. We're going to bring you 5 IPs, and we're going to bring you 5 originals that we kind of came up with to some degree of extensiveness. Some are more just basic ideas. Some are a little bit more fleshed out.
Yeah, they're just, I mean, they're ideas that, to be honest with Nick, kind of laid them out a little bit over the weekend, and I reviewed them a little bit just to kind of get some ideas going in my own head. And it's more or less like just whatever we think of the 90s. You could say we're both 90s kids. Granted, you know, we're not like we don't remember the early 90s necessarily, but I was raised in the 90s, so I consider myself a 90s kid.
Yeah.
So it's what we remember as kids and, you know, the things that we saw. So we kind of took some of those traditional ideas and twisted them to make them scary and awful and just dark.
So let's start with these houses. We're going to kind of kick off the list with our IPs. So I think one of the bigger houses that kind of draw some people in would be Silence of the Lambs. This was, I think, talked about for this year and kind of fell through, but it's all-time classic, one of the top horror movies of all time, just really, really creepy, and could work in a couple different capacities as a house. I just watched it this past weekend and come up with like little scenes that could be involved in the house, but you know, obviously his cell, that really dingy brick wall cell.
I mean, you're talking if you want to get into like scenes in the house. I mean, I love this movie. One of my favorite movies, and obviously it's an adaptation of a really, really good book as well. But I mean, yeah, his cage. You're talking about the guy that's flayed. I mean, you have the flayed dude, or whatever you call it,
spread
where they have
wide
the guys,
open,
like the wings spread open. You got him up in the corner. I mean, that could be your ending scene. Like,
yeah,
you're walking through it.
Yeah, and you got to have Buffalo Bill's gross ass house.
Oh yeah, yep.
All the magazines
lotion on its skin.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know how that goes. I mean, what makes that movie so scary is the fact that it how real it is.
Mm-hmm. There's nothing far-fetched in there.
Yeah, it's like watching Henry, the Portrait of a Serial Killer, where like what makes it scary is just how awful humans can be to one another, and that's kind of what makes Stephen King so scary too, and we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, I mean, that movie, I mean, obviously there's some fantastical elements to it. It has to be, but you're talking, that was right around the same time as a lot of major crimes happening in the real world, so it definitely kind of pulls from that a little bit.
Yeah, and those psychological thrillers are just insane because these people exist. You might not hear about them or see them because they're locked up in hopefully rooms very similar to Lecter's.
If
but
you
it's real.
If you like the show Mindhunter on Netflix, I mean, go back and watch Silence of the Lambs, and if you haven't yet, watch Hannibal. Obviously, the sequels aren't as good as Silence of the Lambs, but I mean, if you like that Mindhunter type, you know, speaking and talking with serial killers and understanding what they did and why they did it, this is definitely like a horror thriller for you. So as a house, I mean, there's so many things you can do with it.
You can have him strapped up to the, his little carriage or whatever they had him strapped to with his mask on. They're in that airport kind of scene.
I think when you first walk in the house, you'll have the van, you'll have the girl that gets captured by Buffalo Bill.
Yeah.
You know, that whole thing, and you can have scare actors act the scene out or something like that, or just have the van kind of parked with its headlights on in a parking lot, and then from there you move on to Starling interviewing.
Yeah, in his like little, not his cage, but his where he's kept underground essentially, in those like little brick with all the other gross people that some guy threw unnamed substance at her. She was trying to walk out.
Substance at her. But yeah, you walk up to Hannibal Lecter's thing, and he's talking to you as you walk by, or he's doing the thing as you walk by. So yeah, that would be great.
You could walk by him, and then a scare character in one of the other cages is the actual scare while you're paying attention to him talking. The other one's the gotcha moment. So you just mentioned one of our other kind of heavy hitters for our IP. So that's going to tie into the beer. So we picked Clown Shoe Beer because we're going to talk about one of the most famous movie-style clowns of all time. We're talking It. With It, the 90s version, it probably could still be a giant heavy hitter, but since this is our wish list of the 90s, and we're kind of throwing everything out, this is no realistic event, we're going not just It, we're going to go all Stephen King. So this is a Stephen King house.
So I think initially we looked at maybe doing just It, because Stephen King's properties from the 90s, and we're talking adaptation. I know the book was written before then, but was written in the 80s, but the TV movie came out in 1990, and that's why we considered it as part of the 90s thing. And then as the more I thought about it, and being a big Stephen King fan, I thought, why don't we just go all 90s Stephen King adaptations and do a mashup? Now, granted, there's a lot of schlock, but there's also some really good movies mixed in there. And I think if you did that, you could definitely do a mashup house that I think brings a lot of things in, plus some, more under the radar movies that you don't really realize existed. And what you got to understand with Stephen King is that a lot of his adaptations aren't necessarily just novels. Obviously, some of them are, a lot of them are, but he writes a ton of short stories and a ton of novellas, a lot of smaller books that a lot of people don't know about, or you have to be a really big fan to really realize that was him. And they made movies on a whole host of stuff from the 90s. Obviously, the big one is It, from the made-for-TV It movie, and we all know how awesome the book was. I have nostalgic remembrance of the movie simply because Tim Curry is a nut, and he plays the greatest TV clown or movie clown ever.
Anything that he does, Clue, Rocky Horror Picture,
and no shade to Sarsgaard and the new It, but
it's just different. It's a different take.
Yeah,
it's magical.
Just encompassing exactly what I think King was going for in the book. I think Tim Curry got it. Obviously, again, with Sarsgaard's and the new It went full-blown scary, messed up, crazy clown, demon thing, and that's what hit what it was going for. But Tim Curry is just so well remembered for that role, and I think that's part of the movie's problem. Obviously, it was a TV movie, so it couldn't be...
It didn't push as many boundaries as they wanted to.
Couldn't push the envelope like a movie could. And I think if you go back and you watch both parts, and just like the new movies, I think one part is stronger than the other.
Yep.
It's obviously not as scary as we remember it. But I think you could definitely do a scene in a house with Tim Curry's It. Now, as far as his other movies, because we're talking about a mashup here, the 90s had a couple good ones. I mean, obviously, we forget that The Graveyard Shift came out in 1990, and if those of us that don't remember what that is, it's a short story he wrote about these cleaning guys, these cleaning service, and they're cleaning a factory or a warehouse or something like that on the graveyard shift, which is the overnight shift. And come to find out, the sewers beneath the city are infested with rabid rats, or not, I don't know if they're rabid or if they're just radiated rats or something like that. So there's a lot of rats that eat people and shit.
Lots of good little sound scare effects there.
I mean, you're talking about for scare effects in a house. That would be perfect. I mean, anyone that remembers, I forget what ride it was. They would do the air at your feet.
Oh, Bug's Life or something
like that.
When they have the bugs crawl underneath their legs.
You know what I'm talking about. So when they blow the air at your feet a certain way, it feels like there's rats running at your feet. So I mean, think about a scene in a house when you're walking through and you hear the noises and you see the dead body with the rat coming out of its eye.
Yeah.
And you feel that feeling on the bottom of your feet.
Just pop.
That's terrifying.
And we also got Misery.
Yeah, Misery is another big one.
Slips right in there.
Yeah, obviously, being the 90s, it's kind of hard. I would almost cheat a little bit and say, let's throw Pet Sematary in there.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, 89, it's basically 1990.
Yeah, I would toss that in there. Just if we're doing Stephen King mashup, I wouldn't be stretching to grab, Carrie from the 70s or anything like that.
We're not picking seven.
Cemetery's right there.
The Shining would be its own house.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. But I definitely think you could pull Pet Sematary in because that's a pretty good one.
Yep.
I mean, there's a couple others from the 90s that people forget were actually pretty decent movies, even though they weren't critically acclaimed. Apt Pupil was about this boy that's being tutored by a former Nazi soldier. And I think Family Guy made fun of this in one episode.
I'm sure that
with,
at some point.
Chris going to this old German dude's house and helping him around the house.
Oh, yeah.
And it made the old guy want some
popsicles?
Yeah, that guy made him angry because he's like, I fought him in the war or whatever. And so basically, if you remember that episode of Family Guy, that's what this movie's about. But it's actually terrifying. And it's directed by Bryan Singer, the guy who directed a few of the X-Men movies.
Oh, yeah.
And if you haven't seen it, you guys got to go watch it because it is a crazy movie, but it is terrifying. So, I mean, you could throw things like that in there. And I'm talking just a straight up mashup. This isn't going to be
no cohesive story.
There's no cohesion. It's just walking through different Stephen King.
And that's almost better where you get, your two best scenes from It, your 2 best scenes from Pet Sematary. Right. You got like 1 scene for Misery and then 1 for, Graveyard Shift.
And I'm cheating again. Like I'm pulling, obviously we're pulling It, which is a TV movie. I'm pulling the Stand TV movie or the TV show. I mean, it wasn't good from what I remember, but hey, the book is amazing and so apt to what's going on right now. I don't think they could do it because
it would
offend so many
very
people.
Tricky.
Because if you've read The Stand, it's essentially what's happening right now on a much larger scale. Yeah. Hey, it's my dream Stephen King house.
Yeah,
and
that's what
this
is
all about. I don't care
about
your feelings at this point.
This is what it's about. So I mean, with that 1-2 punch of Silence of the Lambs and then Stephen King, you drop that Stephen King announcement and you throw that old Pennywise up there and the Pet Sematary logo, you have the Misery. That Stephen King house is a hit right there.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, you adapt everything. I mean,
that's
you sell your rights to everything. I mean,
yeah.
Come on, man.
We'll make it happen. We're gonna dip now. Sticking with our IP houses, we're gonna bring us Scream. So one of the few slashers. I don't think it's ever been a house. I think it was in Hollywood, but not Orlando.
Was Scream a house, or was just Ghostface a part of like a slasher mashup? I
this is
know.
one thing I'm completely unsure of.
Yeah, I'm not a history, so correct us on on the Facebook. Like, let us know all you history buffs out there that have been following this for a very long time. We don't remember. It was Scream ever a house, or I have a feeling that Ghostface was probably part of it in some way, probably on Hollywood, but. Yeah, I don't know for sure. I mean, we could look it up, but
I think it was at Hollywood, but I don't think we've ever got Ghostface at Orlando. So obviously being 90s, obviously being slasher, we have to kind of fill that role. We don't get to pick the Leatherface. I mean, we could pick some of the crappier, Jason movies or
but that's
those
boring.
And those have already been there.
Jason takes New York.
Yeah, exactly. The Manhattan.
Jason takes Manhattan.
Oh, it'd be great. When did Jason X come out? When did Jason X come out?
That was
2000.
Yeah,
we just missed it.
That was millennials. But to be honest with you, when did Manhattan come out? Let me look that up.
I think Goes to Hell was like 99 or something like that, or 98. We're going with a Scream house because that just, no pun intended, screams 90s. I was Manhattan was 89.
Yeah, Manhattan was we just missed Manhattan.
Such a shame.
But hey, if we're cheating for Pet Sematary, why can't we cheat for Manhattan?
We got to get that lesser acclaimed.
I'm not gonna lie to
Friday
you.
movie.
I mean, the movie was shit, but that'd be a
funny.
sick ass house.
It was good. Yeah, so just Scream all around. I mean, it fills the void of that slasher, which you don't need to have it, but as a wish list, ultimate 90s, this is what I want. I want Ghostface. I want that Scream house. I want, that Cindy Campbell character running through. And all it is just it's kind of like the Halloween houses where you could just have it in a house. You don't need big sets, big scenery. Yeah, I mean, you're walking through the house, Ghostface is attacking you, boom, it's over.
The whole house could be just based around that one part of the movie.
Just the ending, just
where
the
they're
night.
in the house and they're talking about like the rules of horror, and he's going on and on about like what you have to do to survive, and you could do a house just based on that part of it alone. Like you come into the garage and the girl's hanging out, her ass is hanging out the garage door, and that sort of thing.
I keep messing the two up because I just watched Scary Movie as well, so I'm trying to like, we should have Doofy in there. Oh wait, that wasn't the real
wrong movie.
Yeah, it wasn't. Doofy's not here. But yeah, Scream is kind of that. I wouldn't say that heavy hitter, and it's not up there. I don't think with Silence of the Lambs or our Stephen King.
In. I mean,
but it draws that slasher fandom.
Yeah, I mean, Scream it's the movie that saved the slasher. Yeah. In my eyes. I mean, let's be honest. Mid 90s, late 90s, the slasher movie genre just wasn't. I mean, we look at it today and go, we have a ton of like great budget stuff, because the thing is like movies today are a little bit different. Like back then, like I don't think budget movies were nearly as big, at least in horror, anyways. And I could be wrong, but I mean, you had B movies and then you had the AAA titles. Mm-hmm. I'll use gaming parlance. So Scream was kind of that movie that saved slashers, or not saved, but like gave slashers a new lease on life, essentially. It was kind of like
and it was a great spin from it because it was a slasher based off of kids that watched slashers, and it was just it snowballed itself.
It was a really smart movie. I mean, people that aren't in the know, we'll call it, when it comes to horror, they'll be like, it's just another gory movie, like why do you like that crap? It's like, but it's a really smart horror movie. Like it knows exactly what it is, it knows what it's going for. And I forget the guy's name that wrote the movie, Kevin Williams or something like that. I forget the guy's name. But I remember when, watching a documentary on it, he was like living in an apartment, barely hanging on. He had like no money and just sat up for like a month and just wrote the movie. And they optioned it and they got Wes Craven signed on for it to direct. And he crushed it. I mean, if you're doing a 90s theme Horror Nights, you have to have Scream.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason not to have Scream.
Yeah.
Scream is your obligatory slasher house.
So it's in there. We're putting it in. All right, we got 2 more.
And you could sell a ton of Ghostface masks.
Yeah, all right.
Like, merch.
Huge. So
And cups. I'm getting ahead of myself.
we don't get to get profits off of this, but
No,
if we did,
I just want.
oh boy,
Yeah.
this would make us what's higher than billionaires,
Right. Seriously.
whatever that is. All right, so our second to last IP, we're gonna be running with a Blair Witch Project house. So this is gonna kind of have that loose adaptation. It's gonna have little things from the movie, but it's gonna be kind of like there was a scene in the Stranger Things house where it's very wooded.
Yeah.
That's what we're gonna be working with. It's gonna be a completely outdoor style one.
I don't think it's a hard movie to adapt into a house. It's gonna look maybe Graveyard Games from last year. That type of thing where you're kind of like in that one setting out in the open and
you see the effects of the villain, but you don't really see
because
the villain.
I mean, look at the movie. You don't ever see the Blair Witch. You don't know who she is other than folklore. So you're gonna get a lot of like the sticks,
those dark,
those like
very dark
things.
stairs where you're gonna have that light trigger where a light flashes up and then you see them standing, head into the corner of the wall and maybe have them.
Well, I'll tell you right now,
pull back or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm walking into the last scene and all I hear is Mike, I'm not gonna want to enter that room.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna like stand there,
walk backwards,
hold the whole freaking thing up because that's terrifying.
Yeah,
and that I mean, talk about another movie that changed horror. It started a whole trend. I mean, that was like, and everybody knows this. I mean, anyone listening to this knows what Blair Witch is, and they know what it started, and they know what it means to horror. So yeah, I mean, the fact that they've never used it as a house is mind blowing to me because it's just they made it for $60,000 and it made millions.
Yeah, and it was such a good age too that it was before the social media was crazy. So they thought that these people were gone.
Yeah,
they thought this was actually
that's what made the movie so popular was the marketing.
Yeah,
everyone thought it was real.
Everyone thought these kids were dead. They thought this was an actual found footage thing. These were I don't even know if they were actors. I think they were all just students, and they kind of pieced it together. And they kind of stayed off of the radar while the whole premiering and everything like that happened. So when it released, they're like, "Oh shit! Like, where are these kids? We can't watch these kids die on TV." But no, joke's on you. It was just a good movie.
Yeah. So as a house, I mean, I don't think you need to do a lot because the story itself works so well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if they took the Blair Witch idea and they framed an original house around that idea and include Blair Witch,
woody style.
Yeah, I mean, just say like you're on the hunt. You're actually you yourself are out to look for the missing girl
kids
or whatever.
Yeah. No, I know we have that big, statue made out of sticks in the woods, have that up on fire or something like that. It's a great, just walking through that, I'd have like sounds of tree branches snapping, very, very dark house, you guys all know the feeling, I'm sure, at some point if you were ever, as a kid in the woods walking around late at night and you kind of get spooked by different little sounds, bugs chirping, whatever, and you always have that overwhelming feeling that there's something over your shoulder.
Yeah, it gives you that camping theme too. So, like, you're talking, like, Jason or whatever, or Friday the 13th, and a lot of that, like, kids out camping or whatever, goofing off. I mean, you have that camping theme, too. You walk through, like, a camp or something like that, and the tents are all torn up or empty.
Just abandoned. There's no hope left.
I mean, side note, if you ever want to see something that completely changes the way to look at that movie, go check out It's a Film Theory on YouTube. I'm sure you probably know what the channel is, but if you haven't ever watched it before, his name is Matt Pat. He's a YouTuber. He does an episode on the Blair Witch Project, and he has a totally different twist on the idea of the movie, and he introduces a completely wild idea, but when he breaks down the evidence, you're kind of like, holy shit. Like, so he basically, I don't want to ruin it, but go watch it. He has the idea, he has a theory that instead of like there actually being a witch or whatever, the two dudes for whatever reason convinced the girl to go out there and they murder her, and that's why and that's kind of what happens. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but you watch the video and you're like,
makes sense.
Holy crap!
Like, what did I just watch?
Movie the same way.
Our last IP, we're gonna go because it seems to be a thing that's been trending upwards these last couple of years, is having that goofy-ish, throw off kind of comedy style where we had like a Ghostbusters, we had Killer Clowns, stuff like that there, where it just kind of was that feel-good house where people didn't have to really be afraid. And for that one, I'm going to go straight old school. I already mentioned I'm wearing the shirt. We're going Goosebumps, baby. R.L. Stein, my dog.
Yeah, buddy.
With this, it's going to, again, be sort of that like mashup-y style house where it's just not going to have a full cohesive story. Unfortunately, we're not going to use the Jack Black movie. I know.
No. No.
This is...
I love you, Jack Black, but no.
Yeah, we're going to go mix it up. I mean, the books and the TV series were so similar. They were shot, pretty close onto it, but we're going to go with those like TV series style.
Yeah, I think because this is a visual medium, you have to kind of focus on the show, less so than the books. Obviously, this isn't a competition, but I own almost, I think, close to all of them when it comes to the books.
Yeah.
And I read almost all of them.
I had them at some point. I don't know what
I'm pretty sure I still have mine somewhere at home, like home, like my parents' house, but who knows. I think with this house, it's kind of like the Stephen King idea where it's like there's no cohesion, like you just said.
No, just best. It's
just
the best of.
Pick the best of, and this we could spend an hour just podcasting about Goosebumps.
We're gonna
and
have
like what are the best episodes of Goosebumps?
Yeah, that could be a future episode.
Clearly have to have the mask.
Yeah, mask for sure.
Fight me. Mask is the best Goosebumps book in episode ever.
Slappy. You have the whole Night of the Living Dummies.
The dummy, whatever. Yep.
You have like a Welcome to the Dead House. We have to have stay out of the basement.
Yeah,
like the scientist dad that turns into like a leaf monster or whatever.
I think it was the first episode they ever did. I don't know what number book it was, but the librarian that was an alien and 8 people.
Yeah,
like 8 kids. Like, they don't show this stuff to kids these days. Like the stuff they showed to us, no wonder we're so screwed up.
Yeah, no.
A librarian turned into an alien and 8 children.
Yeah, I got the.
Repeat that: 8 children
gone. Say Cheese and Die, The Beast from
exactly.
the East.
Say Cheese and Die.
They're
That's
great.
an awesome one.
Those ones were amazing. Welcome the Camp Nightmare.
Yeah, you go back and watch these episodes. You're gonna see actors and actresses today that you're like, holy shit, they did a Goosebumps episode. I'm pretty sure Ryan Gosling was in a Goosebumps episode.
He could have been very early.
Almost guaranteed that he was in one of them. I forget which one. I think I'm gonna look that up.
I think my favorite one was the Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes, though. Those were, for whatever reason, just so outlandish and ridiculous. But again, no cohesive to the storyline. This is just going to be a straight-up Goosebumps house. This is all just a best-of hit. So we're not going to kind of break down each scene.
I was right.
Gosling in
Ryan Gosling.
Was it calling all creeps?
Say Cheese and Die.
Oh, Say Cheese and Die.
Say Cheese and Die, son.
Yeah. Calling all creeps would be another cool one that we'd have. But again, just kind of a mashup-y best of. There's so many things to work with that.
So much you can do
Goosebumps
with that.
house, and again, we're not talking any rights or anything like that. I have no idea who even owns Goosebumps.
This would never happen.
I wish it would.
But for the fan at heart, how we, it's just something that's gonna happen for sure. But it's fun to think about.
But it needs to happen.
Yeah, for sure. Think about it. R.L. Stine, get on it. You can You could sell all your books all over again to a bunch of adults that owned them when they were kids.
If I was at Horror Nights and they had like a little book set up of all the Goosebumps, I would absolutely rebuy
all
those
of
for
them.
sure. All right, so those are our 5 IPs that we're going to use as houses for this ultimate 90s Halloween Horror Night. So we got Silence of the Lambs, Scream, The Blair Witch Project, we have our Ultimate King House, and then we have Goosebumps. Some honorable mentions. So these are some movies that we kind of tossed around that we ended up picking some of these for scare zones that we'll talk about later, but these were some that were very close, but I just couldn't figure out a way to kind of swing it either way. So we got The Sixth Sense, which great 90s horror style movie, but again, it's that like psychological.
On the map.
Yeah, it's a little psychological.
Made him a director.
Yeah, psychological thriller-y kind of thing. So it's not. Can't really make anything out of it.
It's at first thought it's a good idea. But I don't know how you make that a house.
Yeah, or a scare zone. There's really
Bruce
nothing.
Willis sitting there and going, "I'm not dead. I'm dead.
Yeah,
I'm dead."
Like, did you see him? I see him. He's dead. I see dead people.
So it's kind of like great movie. Hard to make that a house.
Yeah, we got Army of Darkness, which could have worked as a little bit, but I didn't want to use that because Ash has been used in the past in some capacity already, and pretty recently too. So I just wanted to kind of steer clear of that.
Army of Darkness by itself, pretty good movie, but it is the third in a trilogy.
Yeah, it's no Evil Dead, no Ash vs. Evil Dead.
Evil Dead is kind of the one that everybody thinks of when they think of Ash. But we were talking before we started recording this that I do think the Army of Darkness could maybe fit as a scare zone. You kind of think of it like the Zombieland scare zone from last year, where you've got a bunch of skeletons walking around with like the old medieval weaponry and stuff like that, and then all of a sudden you hear like over the loudspeakers, "Get me my boomstick," and you hear a chainsaw, and then a scare actor comes out playing Ash, and he starts taking out zombies. They start taking out skeletons and stuff. So that'd be kind of cool. But yeah, I don't know if this would it could work as a house, but are they just retreading things? If
Yeah,
at that point
which
we do that?
if for our ultimate, I'm happy with the IPs that we took instead of it. Another one is Candyman. Again, that original movie, we kind of talked about it before when it was on our episode where we talked potential IPs.
Yeah, it was a potential
But
IP.
because it's been talked about with the whole Jordan Peele stuff, I wanted to pick something that wasn't already talked
Yeah,
about.
this one's almost too safe. Like we wanted to go a little crazy with this.
This is just, we wanted to go outrageous on that end, and we haven't even scratched the surface yet.
So the next one is interesting for me because I think that this actually could be in place of Goosebumps, and obviously if you know what we're talking about, we're talking about Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yeah.
Now, the only reason I think Goosebumps is a better choice, only because, like you said, it's kind of that lighthearted horror.
It's so recognizable.
That lighthearted lighthearted terror. It's scary, because you remember as kids it scaring you. Are You Afraid of the Dark is definitely more serious. You can watch that today, and it still gives me chills.
Yeah, it's
just from remembering
they did a good
as
job
kid.
with that.
I mean, that pool episode with the pool monster thing, terrifying, like nightmares, like that. Like so, Are You Afraid of the Dark? It's kind of like the scary stories to tell your kids or tell
in the dark. Scary stories told in the dark.
Where it's kind of like that stepping stone from early childhood scary stuff to traditional adult horror. So I think this, out of all the honorable mentions, I think this one could be the best attempt
the closest
at a house.
one, yeah.
And I'm kind of bummed it wasn't one we picked, but I definitely wanted to make sure that we mentioned it for sure.
The other one we had was I Know What You Did Last Summer. Again, we didn't want to make it. With all the houses, we didn't want to have too many that were in common with each other. So obviously, if you hold Scream up to I Know What You Did Last Summer, Scream is going to win.
Yep.
Hands down.
Yep. I mean, if you need an obligatory slasher, it's Scream. It's not I Know What You Did Last Summer. Although, a decent movie, but, I mean, out of all 90, I mean, when you think 90 slashers, you think Scream.
Ghostface, yeah. And then the very last one, which I threw on there just because it's my... I love this goddamn movie so much. I love this movie so much. It's not even a horror movie, but this would have been my, this would have been like my Killer Clown's house, where it's like, it's so far away from horror. We're talking Small Soldiers.
Oh, and I got thoughts about this.
Yeah, we got the Garganoid.
The Gorgonites, yeah.
They're great, man. You got Archer. You got the little rock hand guy.
You got the dad from Transformers.
Yeah.
As a dad in this movie.
He hasn't aged in 25 years.
It's fucking legit. I loved Small Soldiers as a kid. I mean, Tommy Lee Jones plays the fucking commander.
Yeah.
Of the
Chip
Hazard.
Hazard.
Chip Hazard. It's such a good movie.
It's great.
That shit's scary as fuck.
I used to play this as like a PC game. It was just you had to pick between like the Gorgonites or the Ultimate Commando or whatever they were, something Commandos.
Fuck, wasn't Dennis Leary the fucking dude that worked at the toy company? I'm pretty sure it was Dennis Leary, and he's like talking about like we're gonna put nuclear fucking ships in toys.
This was ahead of its time because these are toys that should be coming out now.
Dude, that shit's scary as fuck. I'm sorry, if you got a fucking toy soldier and it comes to life because it's got a fucking military hardware in the fucking in the head of it. Fuck yeah, that shit's scary as fuck. Chased around
I forgot all the names, but I'm gonna list them off. These are my favorites. So these are the Commando Elite. You got Chip Hazard, Brick Bazooka, Butch Meathook, Kip Killigan, Nick Nitro,
so
Link Static. I mean, they're great.
Oh, poor Nick Nitro gets killed like in the first 10 minutes of the movie.
And you got Brick Bazooka, who's that like heavy artillery dum-dum with pretty much a nuke on his back that just runs around.
I gotta go back and watch that.
No, this movie is amazing. If you have not seen this movie, and again, not horror related at all.
Oh my god, Small Soldiers! You need to watch Small Soldiers.
I think this was Kirsten Dunst's first movie, or it's close to it.
I don't think it's her first. It wasn't her first.
This was the first thing I remember seeing her in.
But yeah, I mean, for us, it's probably one of the first things we saw her in. But
yeah,
she's definitely been in other things.
David Cross is in there.
Oh, David Cross is in it. Oh my god, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Oh, such a good movie.
Yeah, Tobias is there.
Yeah, you got. I mean, please go back. I mean, this is kind of a crazy off tangent, but it was.
Yeah. It's just one of those movies.
Oh, for sure. I'm totally. Now I'm kind of bummed we didn't choose it.
Yeah,
now
so
I'm on board.
Yeah, we kind of.
The first one I saw the list, I was like,
"What is that?"
Small Soldiers. I mean, it's not really scary, but then the more I thought about it, that movie's
pretty terrifying,
phenomenal, and it's scary.
Yeah, especially as a kid, like your toys coming alive. They were built by the army to neutral.
It's one of those movies. I think kind of like Are You Afraid of the Dark, where it was like a transitional movie for us as growing up. I mean, like when we saw that, it was like it was an early animated movie, obviously animated characters. It kind of brought you from like those kids movies into more adult themes, even though it's still a kids family movie. I guess you could. I mean, murderous dolls. I don't know.
Yeah,
if, I mean,
they don't really kill much. I mean,
no,
they don't get the job
they're
done
trying
yet. But,
to kill people.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like it's definitely not a young family movie. I mean, it's not for young kids.
No, they talk about the violence more than they show. That's how they kind of get away with it. But it could be a good, scary little house. You'd have to blow them up to a bigger size. Obviously, they're
I don't know.
action
I'm telling you right
figures,
now,
but
if I walk through a room and there's like 100 little toy soldiers walking toward me by themselves,
brick bazookas.
Yeah, I'm gonna get scared. That's gonna make me nervous.
All right, so those were our honorable mentions of our IPs. So these next ones are our originals. So these are our original houses that are going to be the next 5. Some of these are a little bit more fleshed out than others. So let's just dive right in. So the first one that I kind of came up with was just like a haunted schoolhouse, because obviously growing up in the early 90s, that was when I went to school. Things that kind of came to mind during those times is you have that super hardwood floor with the gym time. You have that big parachute where you kind of lift it up and you run under and you run down and you suffocate pretty much all the children. Yeah, I mean,
what was it, asteroid game you played with the balls and
something like that. And then you have something with scooter boards, those things that would destroy your kneecaps and your shins, that were 100% not safe for children at all. You could have some kind of like really old tormented-y style teacher, dragging her hands against the chalkboard. I don't know if you guys had them, but the things that we used to have to draw straight lines on a chalkboard was like a Freddy Krueger hand with like 4 pieces of chalk stuck into it, so it did lines that were all spaced out. Something like that. I'd have like a cafeteria style scene, and I only wanted to do the cafeteria scene so I could say that we had a Sobe and Fruitopia vending machine.
Like, obviously, like some like clever little pun horror version of it, or like
some lunch lady scene,
like a very fine machine.
Yeah,
because we couldn't have soda in the school, so you had to like very fine.
So it was just how much sugar can we smash into this juice? It's not soda, but it's just sugar juice. I'd have a Scholastic book sales scene somewhere in like one of the hallways, and then a couple of the other little scares that I'd have would be somewhere in the classroom. I don't know if you guys ever did those little paper snapper things. You fold the paper a certain way and you whip it and it makes that loud pop sound. We always had shitty kids in the back of the class that made those.
You could see you could have like those old paper slicers.
Yeah,
they used to have and they would like
pretty much just
down. So you have like someone, like some crazy lady stick her fingers in it and cut her fingers
just cut it off right there. It's like art. That's the arts.
Or,
you could have that.
You have a bunch of kids that are in the detention and she's using like the thing to like chop their like fingers off or some shit.
Oh, side note, we could take a whole scene from my actual. This is the playbook of Nick Parabickley coming at you from when I was in middle school. My art teacher used to have a closet where she would just put you had her too.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, so she would put
not
children,
naming names, but
they would put kids into the goddamn
He's not
art
lying.
supply.
Like, this
the art
isn't
supply
like
closet.
no, this isn't like making up a story. This lady legitimately put kids in a closet
in the art.
I'm
supply
pretty sure
closet.
she put my younger brother Patrick in a closet.
I went in there.
I remember like when I first moved to Clinton, Mass, where we're talking about. She screamed at me for not knowing where her supplies was. It was like week 1. I had just moved to school.
Yeah.
This lady was nuts.
Yeah, she put tennis balls underneath every single chair leg, so you wouldn't have that sound. So I would, of course, take mine off and I pushed that. I pushed her to insanity.
So I mean,
so she could be an inspiration for this house.
Easily inspiration.
Yeah, inspiration for this house. I think I have another inspiration from another teacher who was just a huge alcoholic. He would hide like a bottle of vodka in his globe, and I remember one time he threw a desk, like he flipped the desk into the wall. He's not teaching anymore. I don't even know where he is.
Yeah, so this
we could pull from a lot of. I'm sure everybody out there has ridiculous life experiences.
You've got those '90s experiences. You remember like being a '90s school kid. So.
Yeah, but all of them fit. So that would kind of be our haunted schoolhousey '90s style.
You got to use those. What are those little those binders that we always had? I forget the name of them. That's so bad. You guys, I'm sure someone listening knows what I'm talking about, but like the old like
agendas or
no, it wasn't even an agenda. It was like a binder. It was a specific name for it. Everyone had them in the 90s and the early 2000s. So the second original story that we came up with, and this kind of goes 80s as well, but I think we fondly remember it from the 90s because we all had that favorite store we all went to. Blockbuster.
Yeah.
So we do like a haunted video rental store. We call it like Shockbuster or Shock Oster or something stupid like that.
Blockbusted.
And then, blockbusted, and like the signs, the typical ticket sign, but it's all covered in blood and shit. So yeah, I mean, you have that old, like, that 90s era, you're basically at the tail end of the VHS era. So, like, you know, right before we got into DVDs.
Those are Friday, Saturday nights, man. Just go there, stock up.
I remember we would walk to Blockbuster, or we'd get, beg our parents to drive us down there, and you just dig through all of the just rows and rows of tapes. And that's kind of how my horror fandom grew. I mean, I remember, like, when I finally got my parents, or at least my father, to agree to let me start watching, like, horror movies and stuff, I would rent, like, the old Halloween movies on VHS. And I remember I was actually introduced to Michael Myers from Halloween H2O, the one in the 90s, where it was an older Jamie Lee Curtis and her son, played by Josh Hartnett. Josh Hartnett, and that's kind of what introduced me to Michael Myers. Obviously, I was rightfully learned, and I watched the original, and I got hooked on the whole series, and he's now my favorite. But yeah, I mean, just you have a house where you walk through the opening of a store. You
got aisle, I just picture aisles of different rentals. You could have the popcorn machine in there somewhere. The adult only section that kind of tapered off where you can maybe like enter through there.
Well, you think it's like an adult only section, but when you walk in, there's like a torture chamber or something stupid like that.
Yeah, this is one of our less fleshed out ideas, but like it made more sense.
Do with it. I mean, you don't want to do the typical zombie stuff, but you could have the crazy weirdo that works behind the desk.
Yeah, be more of just like a creeper, not a zombie.
Yeah, and he follows you and he goes, "Have you heard of this movie?
Yeah.
Have you heard of this movie?
Where's your late fees?
You see this movie?" And then like the last scene, he's like got like a knife and he's like, "You didn't pay your late fees. You forgot to rewind your tape."
Yeah, almost Psycho style, like just that weird off-brand characters. Yeah. Our next one, I think, is probably my favorite house because it was probably the most realistic fear of the 90s.
Yeah, toward the end of the decade, for sure. This is kind of like the biggest fear on everybody's mind. And looking back on it, it's kind of silly, but people were actually terrified of a lot of this happening, and this is actually an interesting house.
Yeah, so this one is our Fear of Y2k. So obviously, Y2k was 2000. It was supposed to, at midnight, when the clocks switched over to 2000, there was supposed to be a giant network technology failure, which would send off nukes and drop planes from the sky, and computers would stop working.
People honestly thought that when the computers turned over from 1999 to 2000 that they weren't built to do that for some reason.
Yeah,
and they thought that because of that, all the computers were going to fail. And everything at the time, and still today, even like obviously today is very technological, but back then, even going into the new millennium, everything was run by computers like it is today, and people were terrified that the computers, things that were running things like planes, like you just said, were going to fail, and planes were going to fall from the sky, and the market was going to crash, and all your lights were going to shut off, and your refrigerator was going to stop working. And
and today I think we're more socially dependent upon it, and technology now obviously is so advanced, but back then we were very technology dependent, but we didn't have a lot of fail safes because it was still new to businesses.
We never thought it would happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at the time everyone was like, "Oh, this is a great new technology that, computers are awesome. Like home computers are now a thing."
Yeah.
Obviously today we know that we have fail safes in place, but it's still
we didn't.
Yeah, and then we really didn't. And to be honest with you, it's still a scary thought to think about. So the reason why this works as a house is because, people were actually, obviously, planes crashing is a legitimate fear. Like, everyone has this fear. I mean, whether you are a conditioned flyer like me or someone that's never flown before, you still have that feeling of, you're very much at the mercy of the plane working. So the idea that a computer could shut off and the plane just drops out of the sky.
Yeah, not safe crashing, just straight down, dropping out.
That's a scary, scary thought.
So this would be kind of like a post-apocalyptic style house. This would be during or right after the fall of Y2k. So you got, nukes, a nuclear scene where you're kind of walking through a city that was turned to a wasteland. There'd be a scene where you kind of walk in through. I picture the exit of one scene of the house into the next scene being walking through the tail of a plane or the side of a ripped open plane and walking down the aisle of a crashed plane with bodies or whatever, and you have characters in the plane. You could walk through the cockpit, and that's kind of like a segue into a different scene within the house. And then obviously you have to have the AOL dial tone somewhere.
Yeah. Right when you walk in, all you hear is
Yeah.
no, that means you've got AOL, like
Hotmail,
and then you've got the dial-up tone, which is the like that 56K modem type sound.
Yeah, so you have all the TVs, almost like Matrix style, with like that green like font just going down the line. Failure. So that house, I think, is probably my favorite because it was the most realistic.
Yeah, what you could do too is like with the nuclear missile type like launching, because there's no fail safes anymore to protect them. You could kind of like start that by walking through like a nuclear launch facility.
Yeah,
and the red
and stuff shooting up, and
you see like on a screen like the missiles being launched.
Yeah, and
that'd be kind of cool.
You have all the smoke in the house coming from the you have smoke come down, and you have the lighting almost of a missile shooting out through the sky or whatever.
And you walk out and like into the wasteland. It's interesting. I think you could kind of mix this house with like a post-apocalyptic. So like part of it's like everything failing, and at the end of it you're kind of walking
like Mad Maxy style.
Yeah, there's like people like the scare actors are then like Mad Maxy
adapting to living in that
like
condition
tribes
now
and stuff like that.
Yep. Another one we had, so we got 2 left. This one is a little less fleshed out. This one might be kind of like our zombie house, because we don't really have a zombie themed house yet. And this one would just be kind of set in a mall. I know growing up I was a mall rat. I spent a lot of days, Fridays, I would just go there, walk around all night, go catch a movie, and then go home and call it a day.
It's another one of those that kind of pull a little bit from the 80s, because obviously mall culture started in the 80s. But I think in the 90s it was still a big thing. I mean, getting your parents to drive you to the mall so you could hang out with friends.
Yeah, that was the place to be.
That was still a thing for us 90s kids. Yeah, so this could kind of pull a little bit from the Dawn of the Dead, which is obviously not a 90s movie, but it's still that idea where
if we're gonna use zombies somewhere, might as well use it here too.
It's a good setting to put zombies in, because just like that movie was trying to say, was that they're coming back to what they remember. They always went to the mall. So it's like
very campy style.
You could have like a 90s-ish zombie house. Like I think you were saying earlier, like you'd have like a Spencer's Gifts style.
Yeah, Spencer.
Store,
We're talking like Claire's.
Store.
Just like if you just remember, if you search 90s malls,
like an Orange Julius.
Yeah, the food court signs. You have like a little shitty carousel in the middle of a food court for whatever reason. That one's kind of like our video rental blockbusted house, where we have just kind of the concept. We don't have the full storyline fleshed out, but given with like a Horror Nights creative team or whatever, this could be a pretty fun house. I personally, just because I would
wholeheartedly expect a chopping mall robot.
Yeah.
It's not a 90s movie, but if I don't have a chopping mall robot rolling around, just as like a little Easter egg.
The last of our houses, so this will be number 10, is going to be some sort of Saturday morning cartoon style thing where it's not exactly your cartoons. It's more of the kids are being sucked in by the TV, and almost kind of like Incredibles 2-ish, where they have like that screen slaver.
Mind control.
They're being controlled by all those cartoon networks to either kill their parents or start some sort of revolution or uprising. Originally what I wanted to do was just a Saturday morning's horror style cartoon where we're talking like Pokemon, Gargoyles, Rugrats, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Street Sharks. But then with that's more of like an IP, and we wanted to keep it kind of 50-50. So a Saturday morning cartoon style, you can have stuff like that in the background or playing on the TV, where the kids draw inspiration from that show, and they kind of go on to carry out heinous acts on their parents, whether they're killing them in their sleep, they're stabbing them, they're trying to kind of take over the world. So the corporation that's running these shows has an agenda, like, and the children are their warriors.
It's like a Children of the Corn type thing.
Essentially, it's a brainwashing.
Stephen King, but like brainwashing the kids by not nice purposes, and like the whole idea of like it takes that whole idea of kids getting up on Saturday morning to watch cartoons. It takes that and twists it on its head and says this was actually done for nefarious purposes, and there's some evil CEO, unnamed CEO from a major media corporation that's trying to control the kids, to turn them against their parents and take over the world. That's a terrifying idea.
His name is Gil Bates. Gil Bates is behind all of these attacks. All right, so those are our houses for our ultimate 90s wish list. So we got Silence of the Lambs, Scream, The Blair Witch Project, Stephen King mashup. We got a Goosebumps. We got The Haunted House, The Blockbusted, Fear of Y2k, Mallrats, and a Saturday morning cartoon. So now we are into our scare zones. We spent a lot of time on those houses to kind of flesh them out because there's a lot more in depth. Whereas these scare zones, we can kind of not just list them off and call it a day, but there's a little less
much description.
Yeah, there's a little less to talk about. So in these scare zones, we have a few IPs and a few originals. So let's go with our IPs first. So one of our IPs that I wanted to use, I was originally going to use as a house, but I thought as a scare zone would be pretty cool. It's Seven. Now, as a house, it would work great, but I like the ones that we picked. They all had a great reason behind why we picked them. Seven, now I forget the name of where this scare zone is located, but it's the one that the Zombie Vikings was last year. It's kind of the bridge over
by the
towards
Comcast NBC restaurant thing that's over that way, where the makeup, basically coming out towards the makeup stage,
kicking over to ET area.
Yeah.
But I envisioned it on that bridge, and you have 7 different setups, one representing obviously all the murders in the movie, but each one representing one of the 7 deadly sins.
Yeah.
So it'd be pretty much just kind of walking through the movie in that way. You could have like FBI style agents as like roaming characters, or you could have the Kevin. Well, can we say Kevin Spacey? He's still canceled, right?
Yeah.
You can have the orange jumpsuit, bad character guy walking around, but 7 will be kind of one of our IP style scare zones.
I mean, it's interesting to list it as a scare zone. I'm of the idea that I think it'd be better as a house, but it could go either way for me. I mean, it's not one of those movies where I think it demands a house. It's a scary movie in its own right. It's not a horror movie necessarily, but it is in the 90s, and I think that's kind of why we went with it. I mean, if you haven't seen 7 yet, go watch it. It's a good movie. I think just personally it'd be better as a house, and with the ones that we selected, it didn't fit. So obviously zombies are never going to go away, whether you like it or not. One of the other ideas we had, it's kind of like the Zombieland zone we had last year, but instead of being based on a movie, we're going to base it just on our love for boy bands in the 90s, and they're going to be a zombie boy band, and they're going to sing hits by the Backstreet Boys, by the NSYNC, by Spice Girls. I don't care. They're gonna sing. They're gonna come out, and we can change the lyrics up a little bit and make it like Halloween related. But they're gonna come out and they're gonna sing like "I Want It That Way," and they're gonna sing about dead girls and eating brains and shit. I don't care.
Dirty pop.
That would be a phenomenal.
Bye 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 is kind of like
you have to have zombies. Like we've already discussed this. Zombies, they have to be involved in some way or the other. It's just the rule of scary things.
So very much like, I think it was 2 years ago where it was like Vamp 85 or something like that, where there was just, or it was something like, there was like zombie Michael Jackson, zombie Prince. It'd be very similar to that, where it's zombie pop figures. You can even throw like a Britney Spears in there or something like that, where every kind of 30 minutes or so they migrate towards the stage setup that we have, and they lip sync or dance to something like that. The Zomboy scene.
The Zomboys.
But you can't talk 90s if you don't talk Backstreet, NSYNC, Spice Girls, anything like that. So we got to throw them a bone there. The next one is something that obviously everyone's talked about in the past. We've talked about a little bit here that it's not going to happen, but it's Treehouse of Horror.
Yeah, go into this with the idea that this is just a dream scenario. Yeah. It's not ever going to happen, but
we're talking 90s. We're talking Simpsons is there.
Makes sense.
This one logically makes the most sense on paper. It won't happen, but we have to mention it. Treehouse of Horror, Simpsons, 90s, it all wraps up together.
It's so easy. You just take all of the existing setups that they already have and you make them Treehouse of Horror.
Yeah, and we don't need like life characters walking around with yellow paint. I'm just like, I want a set of like the aliens.
You don't have to have
spaceship
anybody walking around. It's literally just, instead of Moe's, you've got Moe's, but it's done up in a Treehouse of Horror type
theme. Just over facade, all the stuff that's over there, and that's your scare zone.
Mm-hmm. And then what you could do is you could dress up, because obviously, I mean, when you're there, they're running the Duff bar. So you can't go into Moe's, but you can at least go into the Duff area, which is across from it, and buy a Duff beer. Do that over and have the people working it dress up as something, from Treehouse of Horror. Yeah. I mean, open up the stores, not to sell anything or sell any restaurants.
I would just sell all like merch stuff themed after.
Yeah, I mean, this is a scare
horror.
It doesn't have to be anything particularly like geared at scaring you. It's just, I want like to live the Treehouse of Horror
Yeah.
episodes.
I want that blood, that fake bloody font dripping down with the fake Matt Groening
Right.
names and all that stuff. So we are going to go next. We're going to kind of continue that sci-fi alien style thing, and we're going to talk X-Files, but we're going to mash it with Men in Black.
It makes a ton of sense because it's Men in Black. I mean, there's a ride existing.
It's already there.
It's already there, and they open it during Halloween Horror Nights, so it's like you can ride the ride while going through a scare zone or walking up to it in a scare zone.
And it's been forever since I watched the X-Files, but I remember we used to have that. My dad was addicted to this show, so we used to have the VHSs. I'd buy VHSs of like, back then they didn't do seasons, like they did like best ofs. So like if it was like season 3, it would give you like 5 episodes.
Yeah, I mean nowadays you can get the full seasons on digital or
Wherever,
DVD or whatever. But I mean X-Files makes tons of sense. I mean for 90s, I mean it's the 90s sci-fi. That's
what it was.
thinks about. I mean you think about the 60s, you think about the Twilight Zone. You think about the 90s, you're thinking about X-Files. You're thinking about I forget the 2 characters' names.
Sculler and Moldy.
Sculler and Moldy. Jesus.
Oh.
No, Scully and Mulder.
Scully and Mulder.
Dyslexia. Yeah, I mean, it's just so many freaky, weird episodes, and it always ended ambiguously. You never really knew, did it actually happen, or was it just like did
It was all a dream.
Yeah, was it a dream?
Yeah.
You could easily make that a scare zone, and I think you could mix it with Agent J and Agent K.
And it's similar thing. They're wearing suits. They're government officials.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care if they're 2 different properties and one's dealing with aliens and one's dealing with, but they're both government. Like you said, they're government agencies.
Yep.
They're handling in sci-fi whatever's
The
happening.
extraterrestrial style events.
Yeah,
so
for
it makes
sure.
sense. So now this last one, we're kind of debating a little bit, but we ended up not really being able to figure something exactly out to fill the spot. So we're gonna roll with this one. Both me and Shamus grew up / still are giant wrestling nerds. So we're talking Attitude Era, baby.
It was still a 90s thing, all you 80s kids.
Yeah, so no Hogan, no Warrior. This is 90s. I mean, I guess you could throw NWO Hogan
just to
in
say,
there,
we had The Undertaker and Kane.
Yeah.
So
And we got Mankind.
Talk about scary Mankind.
Paul Bearer.
Right. I mean,
We got a lot
we
going
had
on in there.
scary characters. You had all the goofy, shticky characters. We had like legitimate storylines.
Yeah. So maybe, it's tough because we don't want to go
you
classic
can't
just zombie wrestlers, but I'd picture, a ring, a stage, you have the fog
and
coming down.
You have goofy Halloween-based characters. It's obviously not going to be actual WWE characters from the 90s, but
it was such a big thing back then where everyone watched it. Everyone watched. You had to tune in.
Yeah, you'd have like the Grave Digger. Or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that,
just-
and you'd
yeah.
have like Zombie Man or something. It's obviously I'm not creative enough to come up with good names.
Yeah,
but,
off the top of my head.
but you know what I'm talking about.
Something in that realm where we would be focusing on that Attitude Era.
And they could have hardcore matches with actual weapons.
Yeah,
Like they fight with actual knives.
2x4s wrapped in barbed wire. This is stuff that we're not just saying for horror nights. These are weapons that they use in matches.
But they're not taking bumps like in wrestling. They're actually hitting each other with these things.
They're actually murdering each other. We need new characters every single night because you're probably going to die. So those were our scare zones. So just to recap, we had those 5. We had 7. We had that music zombies, Backstreet Boys style mashup-y kind of deal. We had Trees of Horror. We had an X-Files, Men in Black mashup. And then we had Attitude Era wrestling.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, there's so many things you could do when it comes to the 90s, but those are like some of the better ideas.
All right, so let's talk. We have just 2 shows that I want to pick. These ones there's going to be some sort of Lagoon show, obviously. Now from that, I would just go probably just all of like our IPs that we chose for our houses.
And what do they typically do? I mean, they typically do something that's based around the theme.
Yeah,
with
last
music
year,
from the theme.
it was kind of like the first one, I think.
Oh, was it?
The
okay, never mind then.
Marathon of Mayhem. I could be wrong, but
well, if I'm judging by last year, I mean, it was the 80s theme, so it was very 80s. It had the 80s music. You had a whole bunch of like the different IPs and scenes from the IPs.
Yeah, so we're just doing that.
Same idea. I mean, I don't
just
think
mash it all up and call it a day on that end.
Yeah.
And then our last one, instead of a Bill and Ted show, we're going to do a Wayne's World show.
That would be cool.
So obviously year 2, it's very similar setup. It's just a commentary on what happened in the 90s, and you're going to have Wayne and Garth kind of narrate what happened in the 90s.
I think, I mean, he's 80s, but I think if you had like Wayne and Garv, and you have like some of the 80s slasher dudes come out and try to play like the old crotchety old guy and like all these 90s kids or whatever.
Now, a few like food and drink items. I don't know how we'd incorporate them, but I had to throw these out there because I kind of listed a couple different things that I just wanted to see in some way, shape, or form. I mean, we were going to be drinking Zimas. I want to see some sort of surge alcohol drink.
I mean, I guess there could be a mixed drink with Sprite or something, and they could call it like a Zima or something like that.
Yeah, well, the Zima bottles, just those classic clears. We have those high C ecto coolers mashed up, like kind of we used to like 3 or 4 years ago. They used to sell blood bags of alcohol, fake like, and you would drink them and they're gross. But I'd kind of serve.
Yeah,
I would serve
you could definitely do like
little, not cups, but the boxes. I'd serve the boxes.
I mean, were there? I mean, I guess I obviously wasn't going to a lot of parties in the '90s. Obviously, I was too young, but I'm sure there were specific like Halloween party staples from the '90s, from various movies and that sort of thing. But like, you could definitely do like you've got Dunkaroos here. Yeah. You could easily do like a Dunkaroo donut.
Yeah.
With the dip.
Yeah.
Like you did with the apple donuts. I mean, that could be something you could do.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't know. Dunkaroo's still a thing.
I think they just came back.
I don't know.
But like, and then I just mentioned a couple other things. Dorito 3Ds. You find a way to manufacture enough of those bags and just sell them as a snack. Shark Bites, Ring Pops, and then purple ketchup. You gotta have purple ketchup somehow, somewhere. Heinz made a killing on purple ketchup for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't quite remember enough about food and drink specifically from. Maybe Gushers in some way.
Yeah, Gushers are a big
sort
one.
Of Gushers. Maybe make a drink called Gushers.
The Gusher,
Have it be like super like colorful or something like that.
A couple other things that I just wanted to mention as like a miscellaneous wish list that I don't know how we could tie these in, whether it be house, scare zone, or just straight up merch that they would sell. And I'm just gonna list these off, but I want the entrance like pass. I want the wristband to be one of those slap bracelets. I want you to have to your pass is it's like it's like the Magic Band for Disney, but it's a slap bracelet.
Yep.
I think we should sell Beanie Babies.
Oh yeah.
We have to have like horrified,
so you have
bloody
like
style
horror
icons
characters, but sold as Beanie Babies.
As Beanie Babies in your shop. We have to have crazy snapbacks. Mm-hmm. I want starter jackets.
That'd be honestly, I'm not gonna lie to you. Like if they sold, they're doing 90s anyways. If they sold a Universal Studios starter jacket, I would pay any amount of money for that.
Yeah, it doesn't like.
And we're talking about the snap jackets, not the zip ups. We're talking about the ones that like the pullovers.
We had like that quarter zip and then the big front kangaroo pouch pocket.
Those are the starter. I had a Charlotte Hornets starter jacket.
Yeah.
I didn't even like the Charlotte Hornets. Yeah. But I had a Charlotte Hornets starter jacket, and I think it was the shit.
I think I had a Notre Dame one, the Fighting
All
Irish.
I know is if Universal sold those, I'd buy it in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. And then a couple other things I had on here.
How do we not have horror or Universal themed Pogs?
We need those.
We need Pogs. I mean, it's the 90s.
Yesterdays.
How do we not have that?
I need those yesterday.
Pogs? I mean, Pogs were the shit.
I had the Bulls written down just because the Chicago Bulls were so big in the 90s.
Were Crazy Bones in the 90s, or those after the 2000s?
That could have been 90s as well. Pokemon cards, Digimon cards.
Oh, we could definitely do like horror themed trading card games.
Yeah, something like that. I had the Bulls written down just because 90s were Bulls. That was the Michael Jordan era. So I was like, oh, maybe we could do a scare zone of like Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman.
Dennis Rodman.
A crazy fuck.
His own scare zone. The Rodman scare zone.
I had Legends of the Hidden Temple written down. That one was... I think I had that would have been a cool like little house too, but
yeah, I kind of wish they had. They've got SpongeBob, but they don't have do they have the rights to other Nickelodeon properties? Because like there's so many things you could do. Like
I don't know,
warped Nickelodeon shit.
Yeah, if we had like the Aggro Crag from Global Guts. Well, anyways, those were just the last little miscellaneous notes that we kind of had from our Ultimate 90s. So once this drops on Friday, I will be putting out a speculation map done up with all the properties that we decided on. Our 10 houses, our 5 scare zones, and our 2 shows. So I'll be posting that later on so you can kind of actually see what our ultimate 90s wish list would be.
So that was fun. I'm not going to lie to you, like coming up with like our own ideas. I think what we probably could do in the future is we could maybe pick a specific idea for a house and flesh out the entire design. Yeah. It's been kind of slow news-wise only because there's not a lot being dropped.
And because we kind of came up with this during Horror Nights season, we haven't really got to what we're going to be doing throughout the entire year. In my mind, this was more or less what this podcast will be about. Once, Horror Nights hits its off season, what I envision this is I think, come November or whatever, once we are done reviewing Horror Nights, we're done talking about it, we're going to kind of break down a movie each week. We'll give you something to watch, we'll review it, and we'll turn... It's not going to be just a horror movie review podcast, because at the end, once we talk about the house, we're going to explain how that property could be a house, whether it be realistic or not.
We're still kind of figuring this out, so we're going to come up with different ideas. I mean, that's one idea we've had. I mean, I thought we could do something along the lines of, like, pick a particular era or year, and we'll pick our top 5 movies from that year. We'll talk about if I'm reading a good book, or you're reading a good book, or something like that. We'll
anything
talk about
horror
that.
related will be
anything that's
something
horror
to talk about.
related. Yeah, I mean, because obviously we can't do Halloween Horror Nights 365 days a year. It would never work.
We'll run out of news.
There's just not enough. This is 6 episodes in, and because there's just no news being dropped, it's really hard to kind of come up with things to talk about specifically Halloween Horror Nights.
And this is more what I wanted the podcast to do. Obviously, talking Horror Nights is fun, but I wanted to kind of mash up and take different medias and talk about how we could turn it into a haunted house. So that way it just kind of gets the creative juices flowing.
And obviously once we're back to normal and this COVID stuff has finally been controlled and we can go about our daily lives, I think what we'll probably start doing is some live reviews down the road. So him and I will go see a movie and we'll do like a live review after it and kind of like give you guys the breakdown immediately, so you have to pay attention for that type of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's kind of the future, and I'm excited for it. I hope you guys are too. Before we sign off, have you watched anything new that they should check out?
Nothing crazy new lately, I don't think. This has been a pretty work-heavy week, so I haven't really got to dive in. I actually rewatched, not that it's new, but I rewatched The Haunting of Hill House. I watched the entire series in one day. My roommate hadn't seen it, so I was like, you know what? Let's just crush this thing out.
Easy to do. Yeah, I've so obviously streaming services is the big thing right now. I'm sure most of you already know that this exists, but I use a service called Shudder. It's horror and thriller specific, so horror, sci-fi, thriller movies, and it's all that's all it is essentially. Obviously, being a fan, I've kind of run my gamut on Netflix, and it's kind of devoid of new stuff. So Shudder is a great service because they have a lot of B movies, a lot of underground stuff that you've never seen before. I mean, there's some crazy movies that like I had never heard existed until I signed up for it. And there's a movie on there called Mandy. I don't know, is it still on there? I'd have to double check. If it isn't, find a way to watch it. But if you're a Nick Cage fan, if you're a fan of crazy Nick Cage, like crazy Nick Cage, watch the movie Mandy. It will change your life. Also, I just watched a movie on there called Southbound. I'm pretty big into like the anthology stuff. So like VHS, that sort of thing. This is a really good anthology. It's kind of hard to follow what's going on, but visually, it's a really, really good, low-budget anthology horror. So if you're a Shudder member, check that out. If you're not a Shudder member, I would check out the service if you're interested.
All right, so like we said, we're just going to be kind of waiting for some news on Halloween Horror Nights to drop. But until then, we're going to be signing off. This is Nick.
This is Shamus.
Happy haunts. And again, I would just like to thank Vampire Stepdad for letting us use his music for our intro and outro music. So if you would, just go check him out, Spotify, Facebook. Again, that is Vampire Stepdad.